Welcome, 3rd through 5th grade teachers. This is the second part of our learning series on unpacking the unit planning organizer, and we'll be looking today at the reading workshop block of the unit. So, starting at the beginning of the unit planning organizer, again, as we scroll through, this time, instead of kind of scrolling past the unit overview, we want to take a moment to read through the unit overview because our reading workshop block really is described in this part. So I can see right from the beginning, and the part I'm going to look for is this section right here. It says, in this module, students will listen to, read, and view a variety of texts and media that present them with information about our identities. So right away, I have a setup for what this unit is overall about. And this might be a shift for some of us because we are looking at knowledge building instead of what we traditionally do in our reading language arts block, which is looking at specific skills. Now, we are going to be covering some skills during this time, but our real focus is knowledge building. So we're going to be looking at identity. Going further, it says a genre focus on different kinds of stories, provide students with opportunities to, and here's our skills, analyze the author's purpose, investigate literary elements such as character and theme, identify point of view, and recognize figurative language. I can also see as I scroll down that students will also encounter a photo essay and narrative poetry. So we really have a kind of a mixed genre, related genres, building knowledge around identities. This last little sentence here also is really helpful. Additionally, students will practice responding to their reading using structured conversations about author's purpose, point of view, and theme. So this information will encounter what you're going to encounter through the whole unit, And then as students build their vocabulary and synthesize topic knowledge, they will learn that our identities are shaped through our experiences, personal interests, and passions, okay? So after I have this set up for reading, I know that we're going to be doing different kinds of stories. I know we're going to be doing a photo essay, narrative poetry, and I know that and we're talking generally about identity and who we are as how our identity is shaped. This is important to keep in mind as I start to look at the reading units. When I continue to scroll down, I see the essential questions for reading language arts. And again, that first one is, how do your experiences help shape your identity? How does the author's purpose shape texts? What are the most common characteristics of characters? How does identifying point of view enhance understanding, right? So just make sure you look at these when you are coming through and doing your planning so you can stay focused, because there could be a lot of other topics covered, but these are the ones that are essential for this unit. The next part is our high leverage and complementary TEKS. Now, when I'm thinking about reading, the reading workshop part specifically, if I discount vocabulary, which is these two pieces here, technically all the rest of this section would be the TEKS that I'm covering during reading, and this can be very, very overwhelming. So right here, we want to just acknowledge that the TEKS are here. You can skim through them, but on each reading block, you can see specifically which TEKS are being covered for that week of instruction and kind of cross-reference where they are, just so that you have some of that language there for you. I'm going to continue scrolling down, and I'm going to go to the Reading Language Arts Unit Assessment. For the purposes of Backwards by Design, I do suggest that you go in with your PLC and look at the module assessment as you're doing your planning, just so that you can notice what is the genre of the text that the students will be reading. I can see that this is a story. And also, how are the questions being asked? This is the appropriate way to do some kind of front loading for students. Because when I'm reading these questions, I'm looking for how they are being asked so that I can relate that to how I'm leading the lessons and the kind of questions I'm asking students during instruction for reading. So I can see like question 3 here is pretty good. Like, which 2 sentences from the story, so I'm looking for some text evidence, best show that Nananboso is excited about painting? So I might reapply this sentence structure for this question by saying something like, which 2 sentences from the story best show that, and then replace this character name, right, is excited about, and then whatever their topic is, right? So by making that question frame and asking that a couple of times through the unit, I'm putting this language in my student's brain so that this is not an unusual question. And that's really how you look at these questions to decide, how am I going to support my students in understanding how reading questions are being asked from them, okay? So take some time with your PLC to just look through and observe what's going on. Also notice that this is an extended constructed response. And if I look at the question here, explain how the events in the story support the theme of forgiveness, one of the things we will notice as we look at Unit 1 is that our response to text lessons are using this frame to help students practice. So keep that one memorized because we're going to see it again here in a second. Okay, so make sure you have your module assessment up and ready. That way you will know what's coming up and what you need to focus on. Going into the unit pacing guide, I see that reading workshop is 30 minutes. Now we have split that 30 minutes into 2 15-minute chunks, one with a focus on reading comprehension and discussion, and the second one is more about response to text and how do I do response to text. And again, you will notice there's not one single skill here. There are multiple skills that you're covering through the lens of the texts that you're reading, and you'll see some overlap, right? So author's purpose and figurative language in week 3, author's purpose, point of view, and characters in week 4. And can't you see how those go together, right? That if I'm talking about point of view, I would also want to talk about character because they kind of fit together in a nice way. Again, in week 5, we see the same kind of overlap, right? That literary elements flows into theme. And then author's craft is about the language that people use, and that language can help us understand literary elements and theme. So even though this might be a new way for you to look at how to teach during the reading workshop, we know from research that this is the best way for students to learn. It's the way that we learn when we go, when we talk about a movie or a show that we've seen. You don't say, just tell me about the characters. You say, hey, tell what happened in the show last night, right? And that's the same way our students would engage with a text. If you're reading a text, it could be a multitude of things that we are focused on. It wouldn't just be one singular thing. And that's more authentic to the way that our students are tested, right? When they get their STAR test, when they're taking a reading passage and answering questions, they won't be on one singular skill. It would be a multitude of skills based on that genre. So that is the approach there. So, okay, that is my soapbox on that. And here we go. Reading workshop. Now, remember, I have 2 ways to get to this reading workshop lesson. I can click on this link and it will take me right there. But I can also use the outline to navigate this document. I know this document is long, so use the tools there. If you don't see the outline, then you'll see a little hamburger here. If you click on the hamburger, then you can notice on the left-hand side, there's reading workshop. And if I scroll down, there's week 4 reading workshop. And if I kept scrolling, there is week 5 reading workshop. So I'm going to use the link in here. So sometimes you have to click the link and then go click it again. And I'm going to hop down to reading workshop. So let's unpack just what information do I get in my reading workshop block here. At the top, it tells me what week it is, week 3, reading workshop, tells me how many minutes I have for this block, 30 minutes, and remembering that what we need to be doing is engaging in complex grade level text for that amount of time every day. And this is time that you are with students, really actively working with your students through shared reading, through guided practice, right? You're there with them, leading discussions, helping them understand the text and engage with it, grade level text. And then anything above that 30 minutes, we want to always be thinking, is this something that my students can continue to work on as practice during differentiated small group while I'm working with small groups, right? So there will be a point at every lesson where you're working and they just get it. The kids get into a flow, and that's a great time to think, okay, the rest of this activity they can continue to work on in small group. It will also tell you what week of instruction of the unit it is. So this is, even though it's week 3 of school, it's week 1 of the module. And this is from the What Makes Us Who We Are module in HMH. And the main topics that you are covering, the main skills you are covering this week is author's purpose and figurative language. And I see here the ELPs and then the TEKS. So remember what I said, here are the TEKS for this unit, and there's quite a few of them there. So you'll want to make sure that you kind of look at those, look at up at the top. If you need the details of the TEKS, go back up and see where that is. Additionally, there's this vertical alignment of the ELAR TEKS. So if you are curious about, well, what did they learn the year before, or where is this going the year after, I would recommend looking at the vertical alignment to get some more detail. Just below that, there is a section listing the academic vocabulary. This would be the vocabulary of the skills that you're going to be learning. And a scaffold and extend box. And this scaffold and extend box, we have chosen one of the topics that we think could probably use a little bit of scaffolding and extending. Of course, you can scaffold and extend any of the topics, but we chose one that might need a little bit more, that we thought was important for that week. Maybe because the topic is covered several times, or maybe it aligns better with the read and respond. And then the box everybody loves is the one on the right-hand side, which is literacy resources. And you will notice that the first thing in the literacy resources is the weekly practice bundle for Module 1, Week 1. And I want to click on this and go ahead and look at it so that we can see what's going on. It starts with a family letter. So this is all of the printouts that you could possibly need for Week 1 of this unit. And as we go through, you'll notice here's like a printable version, a blackline master of the anchor charts, some organizers. These are mostly in order of how they would be taught. So you'll notice like here's a decoding page. Like I said, this is everything for the whole unit. So it's not just for reading, it's for all the components. It's vocabulary, it's foundational skills, it's grammar, it is writing. All of these things are here. Fluency, there's some high frequency words right there. There's the grammar. Here's some anchor charts for reading. So all of that is there. A tip I could give you is when I'm sitting down to plan the week with my PLC, I might make one copy of this to look at with my PLC to decide maybe which pages I'm going to use. So that could be a way to do that, and then you kind of have a stack at the end of that, because you wouldn't use all of these pages. This is 36 pages. There's no way I would use all of this with my students, especially something like this page. Like I would not copy this. I would have my students write this in a journal. Anyway, so take a look at those. That is there in the weekly practice bundle section of the literacy resources. We want to remember our technology connections. We have Imagine Language and Literacy for students to use as some practice. There's a link to some literacy centers and literacy center materials. Namely the Reader's Theater, there's a project, there's the Reading Remake, which is like make a trading card and some other fun stuff. And then some other, what we like to call in our department, some other sprinkles on top of the cupcake, right? So these are just some materials that historically have been in our lesson plans that you might find useful as you're doing the lessons for this week. So sometimes some videos and some other activities and things. So feel free to look through those. These are by no means mandatory. They are just giving you some resources that you might appreciate. All right. So then getting into the beef of the lesson, you'll notice if I look at the left-hand side where it says daily lessons, this is separated into two sections. One part is reading comprehension, and then the second part is response to text, okay? And we've broken that into two 15-minute sections. We're going to go through the reading comprehension first. And the reason this is broken up this way is we really felt like when we were planning out the lessons from HMH, some of their response to text was really, really done very, very well. And others was not very connected to the text. It was things that were not text focused. And so we wanted to beef that up and provide something that aligned more with the requirements of 3rd through 5th grade as far as extended constructed response and also promote structured conversations. So we'll talk about that during the response to text. But first off, let's look at the reading comprehension. Just like our other pieces, you notice there are three parts to the reading comprehension. There's the learning objective. There's a list of a topic with some page numbers. That goes to the HMH pages. Then there is a list of bulleted materials and the formative assessment. And that goes for each day. Now, when I look at HMH's layout, they have a beautiful routine for their reading comprehension lesson plans. Let me unpack that for you so that it feels more doable. So even though I'm skipping through it feels a little bit, you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to cover all of these things in 1 week? Let's look at what's really going on. The first day of every unit is going to be a background knowledge building article. It's always a very short text, a 1-page text, where you are building up some background knowledge for the unit. And that is it. And they will give you a topic to cover, but it's not intense topic coverage. It's just like, hey, I can tell just because this is central idea that this text right here, the story of you, is going to be an informational text. And so they just want you to touch on, hey, what's the central idea? What's the main point of this very short text? But the goal is, remember, we were talking about identity, so we're going to do that. So the first day is always one very short text introducing you to the unit. Because then I notice for the next 3 days of the unit, I'm reading the same text, Flora and Ulysses, The Illuminated Adventures. Now, whenever I'm reading a text over multiple days, the first day of the text reading will be a very generic knowledge building skill. So you notice here on the first day of Flora and Ulysses, we're doing ask and answer questions. So we just want to read the whole text with students and promote asking and answering questions. That's going to be what this lesson is. Because then the next 2 days that we go in to read Flora and Ulysses, we're not reading the whole text again. We're doing a close reading cycle and investigating author's purpose, and then figurative language usage. So we're coming back and going into the same text, and we're digging a little bit deeper for each of these topics. So week 1 of the unit will always be short intro text. The rest of the week, a longer text where we're digging in some topics. And if I go look at week 4, the second week of the unit, Notice all the same things that we talked about at the top of it, but when I go down to the daily lessons, here I notice I have 2 days with one text, yes, we are Latinos, and then 2 days with another text, the Year of the Rat. Week 2 always has 2 texts. And so one is like just like we saw in Flooring Ulysses, one is a more like, let's read it and understand it. And then one lesson is a digging deeper. The Year of the Rat point of view is hey, let's read and understand. And then the second day is let's dig a little deeper, that close reading routine. And the last week of every unit, so I clicked down to week 5. Look, I noticed the same information that we had before, tailored to that week of instruction. And when I look at the reading comprehension, I notice this is a longer text that they're reading over 4 whole days. So the first day is a let's read and understand, and then each of the following days is always a let's dig a little bit deeper. Okay, so just reviewing that routine for the whole unit, you start with a very short knowledge building text, then you read one longer text for the rest of the week. Week 2 always has 2 texts, and the week 5 always has one long text that you can engage with, okay? Now, keep in mind that anytime it's the first day that you're reading that longer text, it's going to take a little bit longer, right? It'd probably be very difficult to read the whole text in 15 minutes. So just take that into account, because this day it would be a little bit longer, but maybe the following one is going to be a bit shorter because you're not reading the whole text again. You're just digging into a couple of pieces. So I know it says 15 minutes here, but always think when we're doing a reading or we're doing some shared reading activities, sometimes that first time you read it just takes a little bit longer. And that's okay, because we're trying to get a good foundation for that text and understanding that text so that we can dig deeper the following days. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to look at day 2 because remember I said this is a very short, just knowledge building text. But I'm going to go ahead and look at actually day 4. I'm going to look at day 4 of this because I think that digging a little deeper is something that some of us might not be as familiar with. So I'm going to look, and before I go clicking and lost in any of this business here, I'm going to go look at the learning objective, which is identify the author's purpose, explain how the text communicates the author's message, state words or phrases that support the author's purpose. All right, so these are my learning objectives. And remember, this is the second day I'm doing this text, so I have already read this text. I might have a pretty good idea. And then the formative assessment keeps me on target and helps to make sure that I'm not going too far with this topic. So in your Teaching Pal, pages 23 and 40, use the purple targeted close read prompts to guide students to apply author's purpose skill to Flora and Ulysses and to cite evidence to support their responses. Use the close reading routine. And it says students may refer to questions on the Know It, Show It, page 7 as you discuss them. So I have a couple of questions. All right, so I know that I am looking at author's purpose. I want to find some evidence for author's purpose, and I want to hear my students use words or phrases that support the author's purpose. So I haven't gotten lost yet. I know what I'm trying to do. When I start looking at the links, I want to explain what each of these links are. So the first pair of the first page number links here take you directly to the HMH lesson page. Then you will always have the list, the text name listed out. And then I see lesson slides, an anchor chart, the Teaching Pal, the My Book, and the Know It, Show It pages. And that seems like a lot. So let's kind of figure out what's going on here. Let's go click on the lesson slides. When I open the lesson slides, I will notice that this is for reading and vocabulary. So sometimes this is the same lesson that is already there for vocabulary. But if you're only using it during the reading part of your lesson, feel free to scroll down to the part that says shared reading. Let's read Flora and Ulysses' The Illuminated Adventures. And I noticed from the slideshow that there's the anchor chart. So if I'm using the slideshow, I don't need to open the anchor chart larger. And it has some prompt questions that you can use with students. And then here's some questions, and it tells you specifically which page number. So if I was projecting this for students, I can have them open their physical books or open their digital books, and we're going to go to Flora and Ulysses and find page 23. And we are just going to look at that page to dig a little deeper about what is the author's purpose for writing Flora and Ulysses. What parts of the text support your answer? And so they're giving you the question nice and large that you could project up on the screen. And I notice the next slide skips us. Let's read page 40. What message does the author want to share? How do the characters and story events help you understand that message? So I've led three nice conversations with students about author's purpose with some examples. Then it gives you an anchor chart that you can fill in. I have this just open in view right now, but if I wanted to go, I could open it in Google Slides and then make a copy of this slideshow, and I could have it specific for my class. And then there's a part down here that says write a response, but I remember from our formative assessment that this was not on here. So this is extra stuff that you don't need, but it's there. Now remember this question, what is the author's purpose for writing Flora and Ulysses from page 23? What parts of the text support your answer? Because I want to show you something. I'm going to go back to the UPO. That was the slideshow we were on. Well, there's the anchor chart. So if I wanted to just show the anchor chart from that, there's that. There's the teaching pal. If I go open the teaching pal, now remember, they wanted us to look for page 23. So let me go to page 23. There's 23. And notice this little graduation cap on the side. If I click this graduation cap and I look at these questions, oh, look, author's purpose, targeted close read. What is the author's purpose for writing Flora and Ulysses? These are the same questions. It's just giving it to you in a different format. So if you prefer to open your teaching pal and grab your questions from here, you can grab your questions from here, okay? If you prefer to use the slideshow, you can use the slideshow. And one more thing, so the My Book, this is just the My Book without the questions, okay? So just to show you what it is. Look, it looks exactly the same as the teaching pal. There's just no little teacher hat on the side for you to click on for the questions. This would be what the kids see. But let me go open Know It, Show It, page 7. And I want you to notice that it says, answer the questions, page 23. What is the author's purpose for writing Flora and Ulysses? What parts of the text support the answer? So they are giving you multiple opportunities to address the same questions in a way that supports you, your teaching style, and your students' needs, right? If you would rather use the slideshow, you could use the slideshow. If you wanted to show the anchor chart and then just ask the questions out loud, you could do that using the teaching pal. Or if you wanted to have students have the copy of the Know It, Show It page and they are kind of following along with you at the same time, right? So multiple layers of addressing those questions. And that was exactly what was here in that piece. Okay, so just looking at the questions, that's that. So, and just to think about this for a second, I now have opened, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tabs. But remembering, I don't need to have all of those open. I can choose which one fits me and my needs the best. I am going to go look at the author's purpose lesson specifically. just to unpack this, because sometimes these HMH pages can look a little overwhelming. So I want to clarify what's there. If I start on the lesson page, and the whole lesson is right here, the learning objectives on the left-hand side, you already have those on your UPO. These materials that are linked over here on the left-hand side, you already have those on the UPO. The instructional vocabulary, you already have that on your UPO. So the important part that you might need is the piece in the middle here, which is the connect and teach. And I actually really love these right here, because if you are unfamiliar with how to introduce a topic or a skill with students, this has a really nice short kind of background information for you and what you might want to tell students. It also sometimes gives you hints about what to cover. Like if I looked at the figurative language lesson, it will tell me like, oh, for this lesson, just cover hyperbole. You don't need to cover all of the different pieces of figurative language. So sometimes these can be really helpful. So I take a minute to do those. But that's step one, connect and teach. Today we're going to be looking at Flora and Ulysses and talking about author's purpose, right? And spend a couple minutes talking about this. Not very long, right? We just want to introduce it, and then we want our students to do the work. Step two is always apply to text. It tells you where in your teaching pal you can get the questions, but like we saw, if that's overwhelming, go grab the Know It, Show It page because it has the questions and the same prompts. Or grab the slideshow because it has the questions and the same page numbers. It will, however, here give you some of the answers and give you some of your talking points as a teacher. So that can be something to look at. Then step three, engage and respond. This is where I'm telling you that sometimes we as the curriculum team have cut this part out because it's not quite aligned with what we want students to be engaging with. Like right here, they want them to write a story scene. And there are ways to make that more about the author's purpose, but this one does not feel that way to me. So if you have some students that need a little bit of extension, this might be a good thing to provide for them, but otherwise I would not focus on that time. And then the thing that's really helpful is if you are unsure of how a close read is supposed to feel or look, HMH has usually a couple of these per unit where it's a close read screencast. And when you click on these are some nice videos that show a teacher and students going through a piece of text and talking about it. And I highly recommend, if you've never seen a close read done, or you have never experienced one, or you want some hot tips for a close read, these are really helpful to kind of get the language and the flow in your space. So again, the bulk of the lesson is right here in the middle of the page, and then the pieces just below that in the gray bar are extra supports. So there is that. Now there is no reason that I have to click forward to the next page or to go backwards. We have chosen this lesson as to be the one that is done, and it's all on this one page. So don't get lost in HMH. Don't start clicking on a million things because you will get frustrated very, very quickly. Okay, so there is my lesson, and that's in 15 minutes. What I would do is get kids back on to show them the anchor chart for author's purpose, right? Talk about what are the different things that we see, and then get straight into the text. Let's go look at Flora and Ulysses, and let's go look at page 23 and see if we can answer some of these questions and have a good conversation about it. Okay. All right. So that is the first part of the reading comprehension, is that 15-minute HMH specific lesson. And then we get to the second part of the 15 minutes, which is a focus on response to text. And response to text follows one singular text each week through a multitude of activities focused on building students' oral comprehension. So this first 9 weeks, we're looking at oral comprehension and having them get the language of an extended constructed response for them to be very fluent in that orally, so that when we get to the point of writing, we already have sentence frames. We already know what the language is going to look like. We know how to do these things. And so there will usually be 2 different slideshows included in each week. And the first slideshow will be an oracy slideshow. So this is a support for your emergent bilingual or ESL students and helping them really get the text. So it's like a picture walk, but it's called an adapted reader's theater, and that's the activity. So let me just open that to show you what that looks like. An adapted reader's theater, if you're not sure what it is, it will give you, there is the directions, like how does this work, and what are the sentences. And how this works is that you are picture walking, so you're showing an image from the text, and then you are saying, as the teacher, a sentence, and then the students repeat the sentence. And you can have students just repeat the sentence, or you could have them kind of act it out a little bit using the clues from the book. So here I see that the sentence is, Selena bounded indoors and raced through the kitchen to sing to the tune her family was playing. So you would say this sentence, and then students would repeat the sentence and act out some of the pieces of it. And you do this relatively quickly. And the intention is for students to get that picture walk, but also start to hear and understand and preview some of the vocabulary they are going to hear during the book. And I noticed, and that's the first day, right? So you are doing the picture walk, then you are reading the text. Now, most of our texts are epic book texts, so you will need to, and you have permission to do this, to make an Epic Books account. So this one happens to be unique in that it was a longer text, but it was so beautiful we wanted to use it. And so we've given you a hint here that you're reading the same text over 3 weeks. So this first week, we're just reading the first 10 pages of this text, pages 4 through 14. Okay, so that's it for the first day. You're just reading the text. This is a traditional, more read aloud style thing. Then the second day, you start doing an ECR using QSSA as a structured conversation. We provided you a slideshow that you would use for the next 3 days. And I notice here that I am answering the prompt on this day, I'm citing and explaining evidence on the second day, and I'm summarizing on the third day. All right, so let's go look at this slideshow so that you see what all is there. There is a lot there, and you can see again that it's telling you here's links to the book. We're looking at author's purpose. We're reading pages 4 through 14. If you have emergent bilingual students, because you're teaching this in a dual language classroom, here's a great cross-linguistic connections page to help you out. If you don't know what a structured conversation or QSSA is, here's the description for that. Here's a nice anchor chart that you could use. I've seen some people have this kind of up on their wall, and they put like a little star or a clip next to which step of the structured conversation they're in to help guide students. And then you will see an extended constructed response prompt based on that text. And this prompt is written out the way that students would see this on STAR. Okay, so reading the text, and then here's the beef of it. Explain why the author most likely wrote this text. So this is to help the students can start seeing these prompts. This is what it's going to look like. Don't be scared of it. It's something that you're going to see all the time. And here's our strategy we're going to use is ACEs. And then remember, on our lesson plan, it says use structured conversation slide 6. Oh, I think it's actually slide 7. So I'll get in there and fix that. Structured conversation. So this is the only slide that you're going to do on that day. You're just holding a conversation. So the question is, what is the most likely reason the author wrote this text? And then students think about it, and when they're ready to share, they show a thumbs up. And then they use the stem to share the most likely reason the author wrote this text is to blank. This is the stem they're going to use, and then they move around till the music stops, partner up with the person closest to you, and they share their stem. So partner A says, the most likely reason the author wrote this text is to entertain me, right? Or the most likely reason the author wrote this text is to show what Selena's life was like, right? So they can have whatever answer they want right here because the only thing they're doing today is answering the prompt. After students have shared maybe once or twice, then you use randomization to call on a student or two and discuss what their answers were. And the reason we're going to focus on just answering is because the following day, they have to give some evidence and explain it. So if they said it was to entertain, they now, on the second day, have to give the evidence from the text that supports author's purpose. How does it support the author's purpose? And then the following day, you are going to do another structured conversation about summarizing the answer to explain the reason the author wrote the text. So you spend 3 days just having those good conversations. There are some anchor charts and some graphic organizers that you can use, and we've given you some options for differentiation. So students could just write one sentence of the response on a sticky note. They could fill out the whole graphic organizer, or maybe you have some students ready to write a short paragraph response. But right now, we're just really focused on, can you find evidence? Can you answer the question? Can you have this language ready to go in your vocabulary? So this happens every day. And like I said, remember, when you're reading a text for the first time, that might take a little bit longer. But then to hold a structured conversation might only be 5 to 10 minutes because you've already read the text. So that could be a little bit shorter. So if you borrow time here, then on the other days you'll have to steal a couple of those minutes over. So looking through all of that, and that follows through. So if I go look at week 4, I will notice, remember, here is the intro piece. Remember, I have 2 texts from HMH. I'm trying to build understanding about identity. Then I have response to text. There is my one text, and I'm stretching it out over the week. And then if I go to week 5, again, same information at the top, tailored for that week. I have one text from HMH I'm investigating. And then my response to text practice here again, okay? For reading, it is also important to notice that the last day of the unit is held for the unit assessment. And if you remember when we looked at that, just to walk you through it, remember there was one text with some questions and an ECR. There's a second text, and I can see that this is a story again, because remember our module focus was story, with a couple of questions. This one has a short constructed response. And then the very last passage is a very, very short revising and editing passage, okay? And we'll talk about that in another one of our learning sessions. So thank you for engaging with this work on reading workshop. I'm sorry this video was so much longer than the other ones, but with 30 minutes of the day to cover, it has a lot more to talk about. So I am excited to have you join me back for the next part in our learning series on foundational skills. Have a nice day.